All right, everyone, welcome to the very first plant guncle video. I'm so excited about this. I've been thinking about doing a YouTube channel for what seems like years now. And just like a lot of people, sometimes you are scared, you're confused, you just don't know what the heck you're doing. So that was definitely the case. And I can confidently tell you that I am so excited to get some of this content out to you guys. Not only can I not shut up about this and I annoy my friends about plants, but now the whole world gets to feel the same way that my friends do. To start off, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to talk about, and then all of a sudden I kind of just did something. So here it goes. Let's have fun with this. I'm really looking forward to what this can be. My goal for you is to have some really fun topics, but I also want you to get something out of it. I want this to be educational, and hopefully you can laugh along the way. I really want to know what you guys are looking for. Of course, this is going to be a community, and one of the things that I'm really excited about is to hear the kind of things that you guys want to learn more about. I love studying about houseplants and really just about all plants in general. So don't feel like this is a channel that is strictly about houseplants. We want to really branch out, pun intended, and we want to learn about so many different things. So all of that to say, I am so thankful that you're here. I'm so thankful that you clicked on this, and hopefully I can entertain you and also teach you something. So let me give you a backstory. One of the things that I have been obsessing over is how to say these plants' names correctly. And I don't mean the common names, I mean the Latin names. And of course, everybody's like, wow, you need to calm down. You can just call it a snake plant and everybody will know what you're talking about. But that's not the case. I really care about what these plants' names are, where they come from, why were they named that. And hopefully I can convince you to agree with me on how cool these Latin names are. So with that being said, I'll probably butcher some of these, let's be real. So take it easy on me, sit back, enjoy, and hopefully you can laugh with some of these fun graphics that I made. Side note, oh my God, making videos for someone that's never done this before, not easy at all, but in the future, I'm sure that I'll get so much better at this. And I can't wait to look back at this video and say, wow, the very first video on my channel was shit. But hopefully I can still entertain you with the content that we do have. So let's jump right into this topic. I got a question for you. Have you seen this plant? And if you haven't, interesting. Love that for you. But let's talk about these snake plants. Mother-in-law's tongue, as research informed me, they are also called devil's tongue. Also, the amount of relationship plants have the devil, we're gonna talk about it. But also vipers, bowstring hemp, and of course the trusty Sansevieria. Now, these are the kind of plants that everybody will tell you, oh yeah, I got one of those snake plants. I actually just throw it behind my fridge, and it thrives. It just loves it back there. It doesn't need water. It doesn't need light. I never have to feed it. I actually don't even know if it's still behind the fridge. So that's the kind of plant that we're talking about right now. But one of the things that that we did mention is the fact that these are called Sansevierias. And the big scandal that we're going to be talking about is how the plant reclassification has affected Sansevieria. They're actually now known as Dracaenas. And we're going to kind of get into all this. One of the big things that I want to talk about is how the plant taxonomy or the classification came to be, who was responsible for victimizing us with all of these fancy, very hard to pronounce names. We're going to go over some of the other plants that this scandal has affected. And then we're going to talk about why Latin names even matter. Like, why do they exist? How does me knowing the Latin name actually affect me? So we're going to get to that. Now, if you didn't know, Dracaenas and Sansevierias actually already belonged to the same family, and they are the Asparagaceae family. So yes, you're seeing it correctly. The asparagus fern, your actual asparagus that you eat, and then your standard Dracaenas or dragon trees and all the different varieties are all part of the same family. And that just means that they have similar DNA within their system, and they're made up of the same DNA structure. So one of the things that makes these plants different, and what makes people surprised that Sansevierias would actually be classified as Dracaenas, is because when most people think of your typical dragon tree plant, they think of like shrubby or very tree-like structures, whereas Sansevierias, on the other hand, they're more what they would call herbaceous, more drought tolerant, and they can be cylindrical. If you've seen some pretty cool Sansevierias cylindricas or Dracaena cylindricas, sorry, nobody come for me, but they do have a little bit more of succulent leaves. So before we get into some of these scandals that I am calling plant reclassification, we actually want to talk about how this came to be. So we want to understand how plants are actually named. And I mentioned it earlier, this is what we refer to as the plant taxonomy. So it's that biological classification. Plants are referred to as, when you use plants' Latin names to refer to them, you're actually using the genus and then the species. So what you'll see here is an example of a Dracaena circulosa, which I actually did not know that I needed until I started doing research for this video. We will be adding this to the wish list. But actually the person that victimized us with all of this jargon was actually a Swedish botanist called Carl Linnaeus. And this particular naming structure is called Linnaean taxonomy. And look, Carl, I can't be saying your name this whole video, so we're just gonna stick to Carl, which is a little anticlimactic if you ask me. But he is the one who's telling us how we should be using these words. This actually comes all the way back from 1735. So even though he didn't develop the nomenclature, it's built off of what already existed. And it uses the two names, the genus and the species, to actually refer to the organism. What I found hilarious is that whoever comes about a brand new plant, they can just call it whatever they want. At least back in the days. Now, of course, we have so much more technology where we can read DNA and start off with the correct plant name instead of having to go back and start all these scandals and upsetting plant communities all over the world. But essentially, it kind of started in the 1970s where they're like, hold on, you can't just call something Beyonce's Katy Perryus and say that it's your brand new houseplant name. That's not how this works. Now we have DNA structures. We're sophisticated, okay? When it comes to these scandals, we kind of already talked about kind of like setting this video up with one of the primary examples. So many people are comfortable calling the snake plants Sansevierias because we've known it to be a genus. But actually in 2014, after the plant's genetics were analyzed, that's when it was brought into the Dracaena genus. Other genuses that you see here are going to be not just Sansevieria and Dracaena, but also Pleomele, which is your standard Song of India type of Dracaena plant. So what that means is that now, instead of snake plant being referred to as a Sansevieria trifasciata, it's actually going to be known as Dracaena trifasciata. So the scandal does not stop there. Not only did we add these brand new species into the Dracaena genus, it got even more wild when we actually had to kick people out. So it's not even just about adding to a genus, it's also about ousting. So plant species that are no longer Dracaena are going to be your cordylines and your Liriope species. Again, don't come for me. We're learning. We're all learning here together. I probably said that wrong. But it's giving Mean Girls. Someone was ousted from the table, and now they can no longer sit with the species that is Dracaena. Now, as we talked about, there's going to be plenty more reclassification scandals that we have to talk about. So it's not just the Dracaenas that have been affected in these hard times by ousting members and joining more people into their cult that is Dracaena. We actually have others that have occurred as well. So we know the Philodendron genus, very, very common, popular houseplants. One of the biggest things that recently happened is that a separate group that kind of already existed within the genus has actually received its own genus. So now we also have the Thaumatophyllum genus, and that includes those leaves that are a little bit more animated. Honestly, they're pretty freaking cool. I actually love these. I have a Xanadu myself. So one of the things that happens is that now, even though places like Costa Farms or your big box stores and all the places that they purchase plants from, you'll still see kind of like a Philodendron Hope or Philodendron Xanadu. So this change actually happened in 2018, and these kinds of like reclassification things take a while for it to reach the public, and it especially follows you all the way to your home. So it takes a while for plant reclassification to actually reach your household. I'm actually a little surprised that I still see Thaumatophyllums as philodendrons in my local grocery store, since it was back in 2018. One of the things about the Thaumatophyllum genus that has haunted me ever since my friend said it is the fact that she thinks they look like Grinch hands. So if I was victimized by that image, I'm so glad that now you are too. So speaking of people having time on their hands, the scandals continue, and you might recognize these plants as they are from the Arrowhead family. They are your standard Epipremnum. This one happens to be a golden pothos, and then you also have a Scindapsus pictus, the Argyrius variation. So for the longest time, pothos were actually called Scindapsus aureus. And then as people started calling everything that had a vine and green leaves a pothos, pothos actually belonged to the Epipremnum genus. And that used to also include Scindapsus. However, now they're their own genus. So on a developmental level, that means that Scindapsus plants are genetically different from Epipremnums, even though they present a little bit differently. You'll actually, if you own some of these or you've probably seen them, Scindapsus leaves actually tend to be slightly thicker, and the pothos leaves often have more of a silvery sheen to them, at least depending on the variation that you get. But one of the things that you can see from this image is while the leaf shapes are a little bit similar, unlike the example that we used with the Thaumatophyllums and philodendrons, one of the biggest differences is not going to be just the structure, but also the variation on the leaves, but also the pattern of the leaves and how they present. I will say I love Scindapsus. I have an Argyrius and a Trubii, and they are just gorgeous leaves to look at. A little bit slower growers, but honestly, when you live in a tiny apartment like I do, it's for the best. Now, our final scandal that we're going to be getting to on the topic of reclassification is going to be affecting the Senecio gene. So you probably saw it all over Vogue, you probably saw it on New York Times, they were busy writing about it, but in 2019, the Senecio family had a change. You're probably very familiar with your common name plants that are the string of hearts. or your cocoon plants. Here you'll see them with their actual names. And what happened in 2019 is that the string of pearls was actually used to be called a Senecio Genus. However, because it's been reclassified, it's no longer a Senecio. It belongs to the Corkscrew genus, and it kept its species. So it's Corkscrew Genus. And similarly, with your standard cocoon plants, they used to be called Senecio Haworthii, and now they've been reclassified as Caputia tomentosa. So those were some of the examples of how reclassification affects standard houseplants, and of course this is happening all the time. The difference is that we are very familiar with these houseplants since these are common to us. And I know what you're asking. Why should I care about this? Does this even matter? I'm still gonna call it a snake plant. You know what? You do that. Go off. I actually wish you do. I'm obviously just joking. I like to get a little confrontational in this, but that's part of the relationship that you and I have. However, if you're new to houseplants, or if you've had houseplants for as long as you can remember, one of the things that really helps you in knowing their Latin names are going to be able to find resources to best teach you how to take care of those plants. What you'll find when you're purchasing a plant from a big box store is that they kind of all just say the same thing. At least I think they do. Unless it's something that is obviously a very different type of houseplant, most of the standard tropicals that we purchase are going to say the same. But there's some variation with care, and that's where knowing that Latin name comes in, because you can get a little bit more specific as to what your new houseplant that you will definitely not forget, or you will definitely not overwater, or you will definitely make sure that it grows without any pests. Looking at you. But it's not just that. One of the things that actually happens is that there's a few varieties of plants that get assigned the same common name. And because this is something that is word of mouth, one person will start spreading the lies of what a plant's common name is, and then everybody else just starts pitching in, and suddenly we have a game of telephone and we actually don't know what kind of plant it actually is. So here's a few examples of what I mean by that. Here are two plants that bloom very similarly, and they are both referred to as a corkscrew vine. Now, one of them is your Vigna catacala plant, and the other one is your Phaseolus catacala. So same species, but different genetics. Now, why does that matter? One of these provides a very beautiful, sweet fragrance. That's the one on the left, which has cream and purple blossoms. The other one just has purple and white in their blossoms, and it's fragrant less. So for someone that was super excited to get these catacala plants in their garden, they just spent money purchasing the wrong one if they went with the Phaseolus instead of the Vigna genus. Now, I don't know about you, I have no chill when I purchase houseplants. However, when it's for like a specific project or you want a very specific plant, sometimes a dupe doesn't do it for you. And if this is important for you, then it should be important that someone gives you the plant that you actually wanted. Now, it doesn't always have to be that serious, I know. However, here's some more examples. Here is a common name of Hen and Chicks. So sometimes this is used for any kind of succulent type of plant like echeverias, some sedums, your sempervivum, or any other type of plant that grows smaller pups around it. Whereas the hen, of course, is like the bigger plant, and the chicks are the one that are quote unquote following it. So I completely understand how this came to be. But if you want a very specific type of genus and you say, hey, can you just give me a Hen and Chicks? Then you could get any one of these and you could be perfectly fine with that. But if you were looking specifically for an echeveria, then maybe you might be a little bit disappointed. Now, another very common example, you've probably heard of it. You've heard it as a money tree or a money plant. And here you'll see that there's different varieties of what is considered a quote-unquote money tree or money plant. And you have the pilea plant, which was known as your Chinese money tree. And then something that I was actually not aware before doing this research is that the jade plant was also referred to as a money tree in some regions as well. Now, one of the ones that people mostly recognize as a money tree is your Pachira aquatica. Now, I don't know about you guys. I have this plant. In the winter, it can be so dramatic. It will let you know that it's not happy. And then I just like to helicopter mom all around it and just try to make it happy. So I think we're in the clear this winter, but the money tree but let's just say we've had our ups or downs. So to continue on with some of these common name tropes, one of the ones that we've actually already talked about are going to be your Thaumatophyllum plants, that genus that was split off from Philodendron. However, that does not stop anybody from calling it a split leaf Philodendron. And what's more common is when people call a completely different genus, which is the genus Monstera, a split leaf Philodendron as well. So I have plenty of friends that like to call my Monstera a split leaf Philodendron, and let me tell you, if someone says that around me, I will burn their house down. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't matter to me. But I do find it hilarious when people have miscommunications about their Monstera and what their actual genus name is. Moving on, this one is actually new to me. I had no idea that this genus existed. Now, one of the things that you will recognize are going to be your Syngonium podophyllum plants, which are typically known as arrowhead vines. Now, one that I was actually not aware of was the fact that the common name arrowhead vines has been used for two different genus. So the more common one is going to be your Syngonium, and the other one is actually your Nephthys plant. Even though people call the Nephthys plant an arrowhead vine, it's actually been its own genus and clarified to be its own genus for over 130 years. Now, one of the biggest differences between these is that your Syngoniums typically come from Latin America, and a true Nephthys plant comes from Africa. So I'm sure this goes back when the world was all one big continent, one big landform, and they used to be in the same vicinity, but that's definitely not the case. I can definitely see the confusion, and in doing research, I actually found plenty of posts where people were asking what the difference was, and everybody would just say that they're actually the same plant, even though some of the confusion that buyers had were why they were growing differently from their other Syngoniums. So just giving you another example of how that can come to be. Moving on, kind of love this one because in another example, we have our palms, our sago palm on the left and the ponytail palm on the right. So, plot twist, these are actually not palms at all. Of course, we can all see why they have a common name that refers to them as palms. But your caduciform plants, which is your sago palm, they're known for having large swollen bases. That's where they store a lot of that water. Here you show a Caicus revolta, which is your sago palm, and they're known for having those really large trunks because that's where they store a lot of their water. They're actually a pretty ancient group, and they bear cones. So they don't grow very tall, unlike the actual palm. And then you also have your recurvata species, again, not a palm. And very similarly, of course, your ponytail palm is also not a palm. That's definitely got to be awkward at the palm convention, I'm sure. Now, let's talk about another example that we have here that I find actually pretty interesting. Here we have ivy. So you can see on the left, it's your typical golden pothos, which is your genus Epipremnum aurum. And then they have so many different names and they've been looped into so many different groups throughout the years. So pothos plants definitely got the short end of the stick when it comes to people knowing their name, or if anything, they're actually pretty well known. What I'm actually realizing now is that Epipremnum plants and myself have a lot in common, as we will name ourselves whatever we need to in order to get more attention. So go off, Devil's Ivy, if that's really your name. Actually, with Devil's Ivy, I think that's interesting because even though it's not an ivy, getting back to the topic, they probably did draft up a contract with the devil, because these things can grow in many, many places. Now, okay, back to what we were talking about. In a similar way, another plant, the Swedish ivy, even though it's not an ivy, I have my suspicions that it might be Swedish. No, just kidding. But the Plectranthus australis, or otherwise known as your Swedish ivy, is actually more related to herbs like mint. So they're in the same family as basil, rosemary, thyme, lavender, oregano, etc. Which is actually the antithesis of ivy. Don't eat ivy. However, now, so a couple more examples, and I hope you guys are having fun kind of seeing how similarly plants are. However, it also matters, but you're also seeing that they belong to different genus. And that means that they might require different care. So not every single plant that looks alike, while often it is true that they might just need the same care. If you want to get a little bit more serious, or at least encourage more growth on your plants, then knowing that Latin name will help you kind of identify if there's any different types of care changes that you need to make. To continue on with a couple more examples to wrap up this section, one of the common misconceptions is that lucky bamboo is actually lucky. No, I'm just kidding. Is that it's actually bamboo. It might be lucky. I don't have one. Maybe I should go get one and find out. But it's definitely not bamboo. It's actually another Dracaena plant, and this one is Sanderiana. So even though it looks like it could grow in water, but sometimes people have the idea that, oh, it's bamboo. And what people don't know is the actual bamboo is the genus Bambusa, and there's different varieties. And within a genus, of course, there's different species of Bambusa. So just because they look similarly, it doesn't mean that they have the exact same care, especially the difference between an indoor and an outdoor plant. The very last one that I'll mention is something that I actually got confused myself, but and that is a happy bean plant. So if you're not familiar, a very common happy bean plant is your Peperomia fairy. And when I was doing research for how to take care of my new bought plant, I didn't know that it was a Peperomia because it just said happy bean plant, and Google Lens thought that it was actually a Senecio. So some of the succulents from the Senecio family look pretty similar to this particular leaf shape and structure of Peperomias. Now, what you'll find is that your Senecio actually blooms, and blooms more often, and whether a peperomia blooms or not. And that's definitely not the case for my Peperomia plant that I have. So all in all, that kind of also gave you an example of how knowing the Latin names really help with understanding your plants and being able to take care of them if you want them to grow to your fullest potential. So if I would have taken care of my peperomia as a Senecio, maybe it would have grown, or maybe I would have been really confused as to why it wasn't blooming. And then I would have had to change how I was going about it. And knowing myself, I would have probably just drowned it in water. All jokes aside though, even though the Latin language is old and considered dead, it is a language that has not evolved. So it has stayed the same over the years, and that is to our benefit when it comes to knowing and learning plants' scientific names. So one of those benefits is being able to communicate across borders and across cultures and languages so that we're all talking about the same plant. And even though we might have different common names for them, since they are easier to pronounce, as you guys probably know, it can get pretty complicated to be able to pronounce some of these Latin names. But all in all, I hope you understand that at the very minimum, whether you use a Latin name in your common language or not, it will definitely help you with being able to A, making sure that you purchase the plant that you actually want, B, being able to find the appropriate care requirements for that plant, and C, if you want to, get on blogs or talk to friendly strangers on the internet about plants, you'll know that you'll be talking about the exact same plant, and there's no miscommunications on anyone's part. So that brings us to the end. I am so excited to finally get this channel up and running. I really want to know what kind of topics you guys want to learn, anything plant related, indoor, outdoor plants. I can't wait to grow a community. I can't wait to have my first YouTube scandal, have an apology video. No, I'm just joking. But I am very excited to make this dream come true. And I'm fully prepared to bring you guys the kind of content that you want to see. I would absolutely love and appreciate it if you were able to like, subscribe, add a comment. I want to talk to you. I can't wait to chat with you in the comments. And also check out the Instagram. I post my personal plants on there. In the future, I hope to have video. I'm working with a janky setup right now, but we got to start somewhere. I did my best to kind of make this informational, but hopefully you had some fun learning as well. One of the things that I really want to do is being able to edit videos better and continue to grow this channel and this community, and really just show you guys how appreciative I am that I'm able to do this. And my friends, thank you, because they're sick and tired of me talking about plants. So at least you came to the channel of your own fruition, and I didn't have to shove pictures of my plants in your face. So if you do want to see pictures of my plants, again, follow me on Instagram, at PlantGunkle. Everything is PlantGunkle. I'm so happy that that tag was available and everything. And who knows, you might see your old Gunkle on the TikToks these days. It's definitely not up my alley, but I'm willing to learn. I'll do it for you. You specifically. Yes. All right. The funny thing is that I'm actually talking to myself at this point. All right, everybody. Thank you. See you in the next one.